Welcome to Way Back When, Big Blend Radio's History Podcast. Welcome, everyone. In honor of November being Aviation History Month, we're airing two special episodes dedicated to the history of flight, the people, the machines, and the historic destinations. This first episode kicks off with travel writer Debbie Stone, who talks about her visit to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where she stopped in at the Wright Brothers National Memorial in Kill Devil Hills. As she explains, it was the wind and the sand that brought Orville and Wilbur from their home in Dayton, Ohio, to this area. After 4 years of scientific experimentation, they accomplished the first successful airplane flights on December 17, 1903. Next up on the show, we have a panel discussion featuring pilot and engineer Mike Dowd, Glenn Burrows, who's an historian and owner of Norfolk Tours in England, history buff and genealogist Aaron Younglis, and travel writer Joe Clark. From the U.S. to Europe, England, this conversation covers pilots like Bessie Coleman and Glenn H. Curtiss, who is known as the father of naval aviation and the fastest man on Earth, and the history of gliding, World War I and II aviation history, and the historic sites and museums you can visit today. As always, the links to the websites and articles discussed on the show are in the episode notes, including a link to the second podcast that features travel writer Terry Guthrie and her Top Gun husband, Ron, who served as a fighter jet pilot in the United States Air Force and was assigned to the F-15 Eagle fighter jet. Check it out. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy. Aviation history in America kind of started with the Wright brothers, and travel writer Debbie Stone is back on the show, and she is on Big Blend Radio every fourth Tuesday talking about her adventures across the country and around the world. And today she's going to talk a little bit about the Wright brothers, which she got to experience some of their history in the Outer Banks of North Carolina early the spring of 2024. She's got a whole article and podcast about her adventures out there, which includes wild horses, by the way. That's a way to feel the wind, go out there with the wild horses. But check that out. The link is in the episode notes. But welcome back, Debbie. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm ready to take flight.
I know. I mean, I was thinking about this. We're talking about aviation history. It really does start with the Wright brothers here in this country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're the ones, when you stop to think about aviation, you have to think about the contributions that these brothers made to the world of aviation. It's monumental. But being able to see where everything transpired and learn about what these men had to go through and to face all these odds, seeing it gives you, I think, even more clarity and perspective about how monumental this achievement was for them. So Outer Banks, the first stop that we made was the National Memorial, the Wright Brothers National Memorial, which is in Kill Devil Hills. And, that's where they came to because there was a lot of wind and the sand. They came from Ohio to this area specifically. And they, did a lot of scientific experimentation. And in 1903, December 17th, they accomplished the first successful flights. They were self-taught engineers, and they did what nobody thought was possible. Who would have thought that humans would be able to fly? And, it basically changed our world forever. But the visitor center there is wonderful. It's very interactive, telling their story. There's a replica of their flyer, that made the world's first flight. Then you can head out to the flight line showing the place where they took flight, the locations where they landed. You can walk up to the Wright Brothers Monument, and that commemorates the brothers' achievement. And it sits right on top of that hill, Kill Devil Hill, where they did all those gliding tests. So
that's a heck of a name, Kill Devil Hill.
I know. I love it.
I feel
you
like a
think to yourself,
creature's going to come out
whoa.
and get you if you don't, get your plane off, and up and out, it's like a little terror, like the Koopa Chopra is going to come out after you or something, like a little
Well,
badger.
it's a really a wonderful place, I think, for people who are really, if you're really interested in aviation, but also if you're just interested in the history. And I mean, everybody, most people, not everybody, but most people have maybe experienced a flight in their life. They've gone on a plane. Many people have gone on many planes, but you don't stop to think about how this all happened and where we are today compared to, 1903, and it really is a wonderful look at how it all transpired.
Well, you got to think it's 121 years later, right? And as a travel writer, like, hello, you rely on what they did. Like, you rely on,
Absolutely.
it's amazing. And look at Boeings, big fat Boeings and well, we don't want to talk about all that, but you know what I mean? It's amazing what aviation has done around the world. Like whenever you look at those maps and you see all the flight paths going at this,
Right.
it's insane. I look at that going, what are we? It looks like we are in space, right? When you look at those, it's like, that's insane. Did they realize that? Do you think they would ever want to go to space after where you've been seeing the Wright brothers? Do you think they would go to space if they could? I think
I
they
think
would.
so. I think they, I think that they were, very courageous, very curious, very determined men, with really, I really think that they would have been driven to go beyond, so to speak. And yes, I think that they would have gone to space if they could.
Well, I want to say this too, because while you were there, you got to experience Kitty Hawk kites. So people are using the wind. They're harnessing the wind for good, right? So a lot of people go, don't go there. It's windy. But in the Outer Banks, they're going, no, we can fly kites. We can go gliding, hang gliding and do all kinds of things. So today that's what's happened, right? So tourism has boomed over wind, basically. Did I say wind?
Yeah, and I think, I think it's really interesting. I've never done hang gliding before, but this is one of the top places to do it. And, it was wonderful to really feel like, oh my gosh, I'm actually flying, and even though I didn't go very far, it just was this amazing sensation to be lifting off the ground and hang gliding. And so I think, if you go there and you are also interested in seeing what human flight is like, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to try it, and I'm not, I was very curious about it. I was a little nervous, but I was more curious than nervous because I knew that it was safe and that I was going to be in good hands. This is company at Kitty Hawk Hikes is very reputable, and it operates the largest hang gliding school in the world, basically, and it's right at Nag's Head in the Outer Banks, and the wind is good there. The dunes are high enough, and the sand is really soft, which will help with your landing. So yeah, and you learn about the history of hang gliding, and you learn about all the things that you're supposed to do, and you take part in ground school, and you learn about the sport, and then you go over there and you actually get to try it, and then also watch others in action. So it really is. It was a fun add-on to this whole flight aspect of the Outer Banks.
Now, do they fly kites there though? Like actual kites?
Oh gosh, yes. Yes.
I had to ask that since I was talking about it. Since they're Kitty Hawk
and
kites,
at the beach. Yeah, on the beach, you see lots of people flying kites, and that's definitely something they do. I mean, the wind is they use it to harness all sorts of things, but it's great for hang gliding, great for kites, great for all sorts of things that require that, and that's a really good place for it. So people come from all over for that specific purpose, for the wind.
That's awesome. Everyone, check it out. We go to the beach and it's windy. Like that happened to us when we were down near Port Aransas, and we went to National Seashore out there at Padre Island, and it was so windy. But the seagulls on the car didn't care. They just wanted my sandwich. Then one went and said Nancy had a better sandwich, and said, Nancy, give it over. It reminded me of, I think you went there too. Long Beach up in Washington State. Have
Oh,
you
yes.
been up there?
Oh, many times.
The
Yeah, I was
wind.
there for the Kite Festival. The Kite Festival happens every August there, and that's the reason it's there is because the wind, So you watch the kites take flight, and it's fabulous. It's a great
Oh man.
experience. But yeah, that's a good place for wind.
I know. And you don't have to break it yourself. I'm just saying. Oopsie, I did not say that either. But anyway, no. Thank you so much, Debbie. Good to have you back on the show. And again, Debbie is on every fourth Tuesday. You can listen to her latest adventures. My gosh, she goes everywhere, and you're going to hear more. Last month it was Japan. Man, you go is there anywhere you haven't been yet? Just
Oh, many
quickly.
places, many, many, many places,
I just don't even
many
think that
places.
anymore. I mean, you're always everywhere. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So it's,
but there's always so much to see in the world, in our country, and in my state, and in my, you know what I mean. It's just there's just so much. That's the wonderful beauty about travel is that you never, ever, ever go everywhere. Never.
when you get in a plane, do you get excited at the liftoff like part? Because I kind of get giddy.
Yes,
You
yes,
do? You're like, it's
very.
really happening. I'm going somewhere new.
Yes,
I'm not having to steer it.
absolutely.
You get that giddy, that giddiness.
Absolutely. And then in the plane, I look at the flight path and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at, I'm going from here to here, and look at, I'm going through all these places. I'm going across
So you're
here.
following
And I mean,
yourself.
it's very cool. It's just very, very cool to do that. I
Do you
get
want the
excited each time. It's
window
never,
seat?
never,
Window,
it's never
window
boring.
seat?
It's never, sometimes, but more often the aisle seat because I like to be able to get up and not have to ask somebody to move. So that's me.
Oh, yeah, that's true too. I don't know. I still want, yeah, but I hold it. I'll hold it. I will hold it. I'm like George on Seinfeld. I will hold it. I will sweat it out. I don't know.
Not for an 11-hour flight. You won't.
No, I know. And that's the thing. On a flight, I'll go, can I have another beer? And then I'm in trouble. If I have a beer, I'm in trouble. Like,
Of
no.
course.
All right. Well, that's it, everyone. Now you know. Do they still give you peanuts or no? What's it like plain food now? Like speaking
They
today.
don't give. Yeah, they don't give peanuts anymore because of the allergens and people
Oh,
with
the
peanut
allergy.
allergies and
Oh,
things.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. You
I
get
just thought
different
they were being
choices with
stingy.
all sorts of things depending on where you are sitting in the plane.
Oh, all right. There you go, everyone. Well, everyone, keep up with Debbie on our shows. Her article link for the Outer Banks of North Carolina is listed and linked in the episode notes. Check it out, or just go to nationalparktraveling.com and type in Outer Banks. Thanks so much, Travel Monkey. I'm saying it instead of Fire Monkey, Travel Monkey at this point because we're talking about flight. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Talk soon. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye. Hey, everybody. We are going to have a aviation history panel discussion here on Big Blend Radio in celebration of Aviation History Month. But of course, we can celebrate aviation history any day we like because why not? We're adults, right? So I'm going to start off the show with Erin Youngless. She has been on our show over the years as a writer and author and also as a genealogist. And you can go to her website, genealogybyErin.com. That's ARYN. Everyone's website that we're talking about will be linked in the episode notes, so check that out, as well as a Big Blend Radio guide of aviation history of interviews we've done over the years that have to do with everything from fighter jets all the way to, hey, let's take a gliding plane that we'll be talking about. It's not an airplane, but we're going to glide on the show today. So Erin, welcome back. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Lisa?
Doing good. So you're going to talk about some ladies in aviation history today, right?
Yes, I am. Queen Bess herself.
Bessie Coleman. This is going to be fun to hear all about her. I'm going to bring our other guests on the show. We have Glenn Burrows over in England, and it's cold, dark, and snowy over there. It's late at night over in England right now. You know him as the owner of Norfolk Tours in England. You can go to norfolk-tours.co.uk. Glenn is a historian, especially with family history too. And one of his favorite things to do is to take people to World War II airfields, especially connecting back to the U.S. Sometimes that includes their family history and their ancestors were over in his backyard. So welcome back, Glenn. How are you?
All good here, thank you. I had my water boats on yesterday because of the snow, but we're getting there.
Oh, man. I can't believe you guys have snow this early. Is that normal?
No, I don't think we've had snow this early for a long while. But when Edmund was brought out of hospital 34 years ago, there was a real big lot of snow. But it is unusual to have a lot of snow this time of year.
Well, that may mean another baby's being born. You never know.
Not in my family.
Oh, well, but this ties to aviation history because of the goose, flying over the baby. Oh, no, it's the stork. Excuse me.
That's
that shows how much I know about childbirth. I know nothing
Wrong
about
bird.
it. I know, right? And so everyone, you heard Joe Clark here. Joe is a travel writer and photographer. She has a podcast with us every second Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Glenn is on every fourth Saturday talking on his show, which is the English Connection. Joe goes everywhere. She literally does. And today, Joe, you're going to talk about some of your aviation experiences up in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, right?
I am. I had some excitement up in New York.
Awesome. We'll talk about that. And she's got articles. So you can go to recipiestravelculture.com for that. And then we're going to bring on our friend Mike Dowd, and you hear his wife, Victoria Chick, artist Victoria Chick, on our show every third Saturday talking about art history. And we have a really good time chatting with Victoria. And every time we get to visit, which is we're due back to visit Mike and Victoria. We have a good chat with Mike, and he's an aviation history buff, as I know, and I've heard that he's worked on spy planes. Is this true, Mike? And welcome.
Yes, it is. It's truly a pleasure to be here, but I don't talk to any because of the Official Secrets Act. You'll have to plug your ears while I'm talking, if you don't mind.
Okay, well, this is going to be good. Is the mafia going to come after us? Who's going to come after us?
The FAA mafia, and they're worse.
Oh, hey, and you know what? I heard that the FAA came about because of a plane crash in the Grand Canyon, and that's how the FAA came together in aviation history. So,
oh my gosh,
yeah, how about that? I know, just a little bit to be dangerous, but not fly.
Oh my gosh. I had not heard that, but I tell you what, I wouldn't be surprised because they are kind of like ambulance chasers in some way, so to speak, but aerial ambulance chasers. But hey, who signed the first pilot's license in the United States, for instance? I would ask that along with questions about the FAA. Aviation got off to a kind of a slow start here. Well, no, wait a minute. After Orville and Wilbur, aviation moved all over the world, really.
Yeah.
But hey, and there's an incredible history, and it's inspirational to anybody: man, women, children, old folks, young folks.
We want to be birds, basically. We want to be birds, and then we learn how to fly, and then shoot, and do warfare with them. Which is, there's the joyous part of it. But Mike, do you know how to fly? Are you a pilot?
Oh yes, I have a commercial pilot's license. I've been flying since for the last 60 some odd years, and I also have a mechanic's license.
Wow! For
working on airplanes, so and it's been loads of fun. I've seen a lot. I've rented a lot of airplanes. I've owned a couple, and things have changed. I'll tell you, since 1960.
Wow! What inspired you to get into airplanes and fly them? Is it as a little boy looking up going, I want to do that?
Well, who didn't? You get out of the end of World War II and aviators were super impressive people. I mean, they were exciting to watch. Who wouldn't be? And you could afford it. When I was in college, I worked in a gas station and could afford to take flying lessons. So things have changed a lot, though. Speaking of history, things have changed a lot since then.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a pilot, and he's done a lot of different kinds of flights, and he just said, I said, oh, we were talking about something. He's traveled the world, literally. I think he's maybe 10 countries shy of doing the entire world. And
wow.
including North Korea, which I think is pretty impressive. And we were having a discussion. I said, oh, so-and-so just probably had a bad day. And he says, as a pilot, you're not allowed to have a bad day. You're just not, is that true? I think it is, right? You're not allowed to have a bad day.
The worst day flying could be pretty bad, though, I have to say. So I would have to think about that. It's not like fishing. The worst day fishing is better than the best day anywhere else, I think.
I think it's because he was flying people, transporting them. So you're not allowed to be off. My. You must be on it, You know what I mean? You can't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, unless if you're a commercial pilot flying for American Airlines, you are a spokesman for American Airlines, but you can still throw somebody off your airplane if he gets crosswise with you.
Yeah, that's what I heard. He has to know how to shoot guns and all kinds of things. Like he's like, yeah, you have to be prepared for anything that can happen on board while you're in the sky. Anything. Like if he has to take someone down, he can.
Yes. I don't know if you can perform marriages or not, like the captain of a ship, but you're pretty close to that, I would think.
Are we on the Love Boat in the sky?
I'm just saying, yeah, I know, but with wings.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? That's crazy.
Yes.
Well, Glenn, I want to go over to you in England. We talked about World War II. So, and when you think about in this country, America, it was actually our Air Force was started out of university students that started our Air Force, I believe, that said, hey, we need aviation into war. But Glenn, and I think Florida was a part, and the East Coast was really good in training. And then, aviation going, into the wars. But Glenn, Norfolk, apparently your backyard is a good place for all of this.
Absolutely. I mean, Norfolk and Suffolk are absolutely covered in World War II airfields because we are on the East Coast. So therefore, we're really close to Holland and Germany. So, the flight path from the East Coast to Germany is all across water. So, it's really, really easy to get from Norfolk to the north part of Europe. So we have got a lot of airfields, and we had literally hundreds of thousands of American servicemen in East Anglia during World War II. And the most popular place that I take my visitors to is Duxford, which is a World War II airfield, but it's also the National War Museum, which has all World War II aircraft, some of them flying. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and there were Spitfires flying all over the place. So they regularly go. B-17s are about there, B-24s. There's every sort of aircraft to look at. So, yeah, I mean, if you're interested in World War II airfields, then East Anglia is the place to come and visit.
Now, have you taken people like from the States? Actually, I know the answer to this question, but I'm just doing this for the audience purpose. Your visitors that come over, because I know your tour company, it's like whatever people want to do, Glenn will take you around and, keep it legal, everybody. Just saying, I thought I better watch myself. But, have you ever had people come from the States or Australia, all the different countries come over and connect with their ancestors at these airfields?
Oh, yeah. I mean, not only have I had people come over to connect with their family, but I was lucky enough to have one man come over who was 93, and he was a World War II pilot. Sadly, he's passed away since then, but I was able to take him to the airfield that he served in. And I was also able to take him to Duxford and he could stand beside a bomber that he flew, B-17, or a Liberator. And, that was an honor. It really was an honor. But I've taken several children of World War II veterans to the airfields where they served. One of my really interesting ones, I had a group of sisters who came over because their dad had flown from near Norwich, and he'd met his wife in Norwich Hospital. No, he'd met her at a dance. She worked in Norwich Hospital. They got married in the Roman Catholic Cathedral in Norwich, and I discovered the newspaper article which told me which pub they had their reception in. So I was able to take the children of this marriage to not only the cathedral where they got married, but we went to the pub where they actually had their wedding reception. So I mean that was really lovely to connect that. Yeah,
wow.
It's
So weddings are
very
involved
emotional.
here.
Sorry?
There we go. I was going to say, Mike, there we go. We got the wedding now. See?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got that. We got that in there. I want to go to Erin, because I know you want to talk about Bessie Coleman, but she's actually predating all of this, right? Her life.
Is in between. She started because of World War I. So yes, she predates World War II by a lot, actually.
And so she's from Texas. I just drove across. In fact, I think we drove, you had us pull over for Cisco, Texas.
I did,
we should have done this for Bessie too, because I think we went near her place too. I remember seeing it. Let's talk a little bit about her, because what intrigued you with her? Well, she's awesome, but
she is awesome. Well, I actually grew up loving airplanes, and every year at Labor Day, my family would go to the air show in Cleveland. It was held at Burke Lakefront Airport. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a very small airport. But what's unique about it is there is a museum there, which is the International Women's Air and Space Museum. Mm-hmm. And there is information there about Bessie. And I remember being little and looking up and seeing, it's a famous photo of her, and she has her flight hat on, and just smiling and thinking how cool that was. And I wanted to do that. I have not, but I remember thinking it was very cool. And then when I got older and started working in genealogy and history, I started digging into her life, because she's still cool. Even this many years later, 100 years later.
Yeah.
She's still a very fascinating person.
So she started flying as a woman back then, because isn't that at the back in the day when, so she's from Waxahachie, Texas, which is in Ellis County, Texas. But didn't she, she starts flying and everything, which is amazing, because back in the day, I remember Nancy, my mom, saying, hey, when she was a kid wanting to go to college, it was like, you're either going to be a nurse or a teacher. And I talk about this a lot on the show. And then there's these other women who say, nah, I'm going to do this. We got Amelia Earhart, of course. And Bessie's like, I'm going to do this. But she was also an African American woman doing this. Doesn't that separate her
and
up
part
a little
Native
bit more?
On her dad's side.
Oh, that's right. Native American too.
Yes.
So, for her to fly, didn't she know Amelia Earhart? I don't know if I'm going to mess it up here.
I'm actually not 100%. I can look that up and get back to you. But her story is very interesting because, hold on.
Oh, she's coming. She's
Sorry.
coming. I know Erin's just getting over our cold here. We've all got a little bit of that flu season going around. But you good?
Well, I am. She grew up, like you said, in Texas, and she was part of a very large family. She was one of 13 children. And in 1901, her dad, who is part Native American, moved back to Oklahoma because there was so many issues happening in Jim Crow, Texas. And her mom raised her and her siblings to be educated in a time, as you said, they're African American, where this was unheard of. And she started school 2 years before it was even considered a thing that was going to happen for African American children. She would walk some ridiculous amount of miles, but she was educated. And then as she got older, she applied to college in Oklahoma and saved up enough money to go for a year, but school was expensive. So she ended up dropping out and moved to Chicago with two of her brothers. And when she was in Chicago, she became a manicurist.
Wow.
And as a child, seeing aircraft, she was very fascinated by it and wanted to be part of it, but it seemed not obtainable. And then as a manicurist, all these people are coming into town who just came back from World War I talking about flying planes in World War I, and it just re-sparked that desire to become a pilot. So she applied to schools in the United States, and they were like, no, you're a female and African American. Yeah. That's not happening. So she spoke to a friend of hers who worked at a local newspaper, Robert Abbott, and he was like, well, you can go to France. And her brother also confirmed this. He was like, yes, when I was in France, women were flying there. So she learned French, and she got a better job and saved up her money and applied to a bunch of schools in France, and she was accepted.
Wow.
So she got
determination.
She got her passport. She got a 1-year visa from the consulate. And in November of 1920, she got on a ship and sailed to France.
Wow. Yeah. And it wasn't fun. It wasn't like, going on a princess cruise.
No, no. She was on a giant, the ship was called the Impenetrator. So I'm pretty sure it was,
Impenetrator. My God.
Yeah.
What a name.
Right.
That's interesting. So
and I also doubt she was first or second class. So she was probably not even on deck.
And so didn't that change it for her going to France? And because in that era, like I know a lot of women musicians went to France. The Tuskegee Airmen that went to France learned a little bit like, hey, yes, you're human. You are an individual.
She
you're well
influenced
respected.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Tuskegees? Really?
Yes, really. Because when she came back, so when she was in France, she got her flight she became a pilot. But not only did she become the first American pilot, she became the first American female, African American, or Native pilot ever.
Wow.
And her license was international. So when she came back to the United States, no one here could be like, no, you're not a pilot, because her license covered everywhere.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, so check that out. So it's an empowering story.
Yes.
And then she did stunts, right? Didn't she do stunts?
She did. That was the only job if you were a civilian pilot.
Oh.
So, yeah. All the other flying jobs were saved for veterans.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So since she was a civilian, she was a stunt pilot, and she learned how to do loop-the-loops and all sorts of crazy flying upside down things. And that's actually part of what led to her death. But before her death, she used her platform to go around and talk to people. And she would only talk in places that were not segregated, including her hometown, where they wanted her to come back and talk. And she said, only if everybody can come through the same door. And they said yes. Yes.
That's cool.
It's amazing. Yeah. She was an amazing woman, and she even was supposed to be in Hollywood, but she ended up walking off the set because she didn't like the depiction of the African American characters. She was not a fan of Uncle Tom's Cabin.
No. Yeah, she wasn't.
No.
Oh, well, and I want to say that I did find out that Bessie and Amelia, they were two different eras. So I got to get that straight. But they were both PR savvy. They were promoters from what I'm reading. They're like, I know, like Amelia was like a little beauty queen, She was into, and there were things like the powder puff derby and stuff like that,
Yes.
So she was kind of like that too, but they were in two different eras.
Yes.
So
but Queen Bessie dubbed herself that, and she loved to talk, and she loved to be in front of the camera. When she landed back in the United States from France, there were newspapermen there, and she talked herself up and was not afraid of being in front of the camera and being in front of people and speaking her mind.
Wow. Cool. Cool. Now, Mike, I know that you're into aviation history, and you've read up on Bessie too, Queen Bessie. We better call her the right name, right?
Yes,
give her the title.
actually, and she was a decent human being, and I mean, she couldn't buy an airplane even in the United States. And not only, they just said, we don't sell airplanes to women, you know, and. So how are you going to? And that was a problem up until, I mean, she died in late 1926, something like that.
Yes.
And I think even at that time she had trouble actually buying an airplane.
She actually bought one.
But
she did.
Okay.
She did 2 years before it. But no, you're right. It was terrible. It was not a good plane, and she crashed it within minutes of owning it because she couldn't get a decent plane.
Wow.
It was a problem, but. Odd to me, women in aviation is really interesting. It's inspirational, and you've got people, well-known people like Amelia Earhart, and not so well-known people like Pancho Barnes. So you've got one of the earliest flyers was the girl whose name I'm having trouble with, but she didn't believe in seatbelts. And she learned how to fly and fell out of an airplane about 2 years later, actually. So if I can remember her name, it'll help. But I mean, what I observed was if you were a woman pilot, you were well accepted by other pilots in general, with some exceptions there. But if you were a woman, you were a pilot first, and guys would help you. Your fellow lady pilots would help you. It's like, I hate to use the word fraternity. It certainly was a kind of a closed. Harriet Quimby was the girl's name, who died in 1912, falling out of an airplane. Anyway, Bessie had some super problems in there, but it bothered her. Who knows? But she overcame it. She said, "I'm not going to let that bother me. I need money." She went to a publisher there in Chicago, and he said, "I'll help you out." And she had people that helped her and knew she could do what she wanted to do, and she did it, for heaven's sakes.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that's so amazing. Yeah. It's such an empowering story. And Glenn, in England, do you have any women aviators that you know of?
You've now asked me a question, and I have got no idea what the answer is to that one.
Yeah, okay. I'm just asking if you know of any. Well, no, because it is really pretty. I mean, and especially in that era, and even now, you don't see that many women pilots. Even today, we don't see that many women pilots. You know, how many times do you go on an airplane to go from A to B, and your captain's a woman? You know, it's not that often. They're there, but it's few.
I'm sure there was a woman pilot in the 1920s, but I can't remember her name.
I want to go over to Jo. She, went up into, upstate New York, and she visited the Glenn H. Curtiss Museum, which is known for the father of naval aviation and the fastest man on earth. Ooh, he traveled at the speed of light. Did you see any women's aviation history when you were at upstate New York, Jo? Because I know you went to a few museums and you went gliding. So Jo made history gliding. She probably had glass and glide. Sorry.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. I do remember seeing an exhibit sign, and I don't remember what it was and didn't think, and I don't think I took a picture of it. But I do remember Bessie Coleman having something. There was, of course, mention of her in this Glenn Curtiss Museum. But what I want to throw in here before I start talking about my soaring is, we've been talking about World War II. At the end of World War I, Germany, because of the Treaty of Versailles, they were not allowed to use any kind of motorized aircraft, no aircrafts, and they could not train pilots in aircrafts. All they could use were gliders. And at the beginning of World War II, they were still using gliders. And we started using gliders to land equipment and troops silently behind enemy lines. and the U.S. Army Air Corps used Harris Hill there in Elmira, where I went gliding. They used Harris Hill's site to train glider pilots during the war.
Wow. So it's silent but violent.
That's it.
We're talking air. I had to go there.
They were undetected, so they were using gliders during World War II.
Wow, that's cool. Isn't that
Hey,
part
listen,
of go ahead.
The Germans violated the Treaty of Versailles a bit. And if you look at a BMW motorcycle emblem, it is actually a propeller spinning. And the BMW opposed Boxer twin that was invented about that time was an early aircraft engine type that they were experimenting with. Mm-hmm. So those rascals weren't really not flying exactly in the same way they weren't supposed to build battleships and a bunch of other things.
They were flying under the radar, weren't they?
Exactly. If they had radar, right.
Yeah.
Wow. But you know what? Speaking of World War II and women's history, what about the night witches?
In Russia?
Yeah. Weren't they pretty cool? Because they were female pilots that bombed the Nazis. Like, isn't that pretty cool? They were, don't mess with those fearless witches. Yeah.
But we had the women's air service pilots, WASPs, in World War II, and a lot of them were in the flying world, actually. And I would assume most of them were 99s, too. A club formed of women pilots in the late 20s. So one of my early instructors was a World War II bomber pilot, a man, and a WASP pilot, a woman.
Oh.
And probably the best pilot I've ever seen.
Two separate people?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yes. Okay. So that's amazing. Wow.
Well, they were, I tell you what, they were, I flew out of Hawthorne, California a lot, and many 99s came through there because Rose Aviation was owned by Gene Rose, who was a 99 and a WASP pilot, actually from World War II. And so these people would come cruising, and I wish I had paid more attention because somebody'd say, oh, here, meet Louise Thaden, something like that. Oh, yeah. It's like meeting Amelia Earhart, something like that. If you paid attention, oh, gosh, but you're not paying attention, you say, oh, yeah, she's just another girl, something like that. So, hey, but they were out there, and we had many women pilots being trained at Rose Aviation while I was there, oddly enough. So, and they fit in fine. And I hate to say it, being a man, of course, it seemed to me like they made as good, if not better, pilots than the average guy out there.
Attention to detail and multitasking. Yeah.
Good.
I'm just saying.
A very good point. Gee.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I'm going to keep saying. I want to go back to Joe. Tell us a little bit more about upstate New York because so much history went down there in flight. I mean, the whole East Coast. It's like Glenn and his East Coast. Something happens in the East where, I don't know. It's like, well, then, Mike's now got the West Coast covered too. So, and we've got this, the center of the country. So yeah, a little bit of everything. But upstate New York seemed to have a lot going on in regards to air. And you did glide. You went gliding.
I did. I went gliding. It was fantastic. We got hats. They were our little after flight gift. And the hat says, no engine, no problem. Of course, there was an engine in front of us. We had a little single engine plane that pulled the glider up into the sky. But then once you're up, it's up to the pilot of the glider then to catch those thermals. And Harris Hill it's one of the oldest gliding clubs in the country. And its location is perfect. The winds come up those valleys from the Finger Lakes and hit the hills and then come straight up into the sky. And so that's what they're catching are those winds. You think about when you're driving down the road and as a kid, especially, you'd stick your arm out the window and, the wind would catch it and fly your arm up. It's sort of that same thing. The wind is catching those wings and just lifting you up. They've recently, just this year, they had somebody that left from Harris Hill and flew something like 650 miles, over 7 hours of flying time in one day. He left upstate New York, went down into Pennsylvania to the border of Maryland, then back up into someplace in Pennsylvania, back to Maryland, back to Pennsylvania, and then finally landed, like I said, over 7 hours of flying, all on the thermal winds that are just lifting those planes up. I just find that fascinating.
That's amazing. Glenn, you've seen some of the historic gliders, right?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to go to the beaches in Normandy. And one of the places I visited was a place called Saint-Meg-l'Église, where there was one of the parachutists from the gliders actually landed on the church spire. So
wow.
That was not a good place to land. But in the museum there, they've got some of the gliders, so you can see exactly what they were like. And basically, they were made of wood and tissue paper, more or less. Yep. I mean, they were very, very flimsy things, but they obviously did their job because they took the parachutists into Normandy, which was amazing. But Normandy is a fantastic place to go just to get the scale of World War II. It really is.
We had the privilege of knowing a gentleman who was one of our first Army comics. Like he did the comics, like the comic strips in the newspaper for the Army, and was in World War II. And not only was he one of the first comics, but he was a parachutist, and in the ocean, and would land on the big bargee thing or whatever it's called, the big ship thing. And you can tell how much I know, but it's amazing what he did. His life I'm like, are you nuts? That, I'm just saying, that's, when we hear these stories and we read the history, but when you actually try to, like, when Aaron's talking about Bessie going on that, ship across to France, it's just not that easy to do, So I think that's something to think about of, how easy is it? How is, it's nothing but paper, like you're saying, and a few sticks that they're gliding in on,
Yeah. And I actually have I have done a parachute jump, and it was exhilarating, absolutely amazing. But I cannot imagine what it would have been like if I was parachuting into a war zone. Now, that must have been really, because you're a sitting target, aren't you? You're just floating down with this great big white thing above you saying, look at me, I'm now coming down. It must have been really frightening.
I know. I want to go. Mike, have you ever jumped off a plane in some way or glided?
No, I have visited. A friend of mine in California used to get me to fly him out to Lake Elsinore, and he would jump. I just never worked up the nerve to do it. I had to go to the doctor 2 weeks ago, and a young lady that checked me in, 23, nice girl, talking, and I said, well, do you fly? The question came up. She said, no, but I do parachute. For heaven's sake, she said, it's wonderful. And I spent the next 20 minutes listening to her tell me how wonderful it was. And she told me where she dives and stuff like that. And I said, this girl has guts, is all I can say. I didn't want to jump out of an airplane. And it's everybody who's done it has said, this is wonderful. And I just don't know.
I might barf.
I'm 80 years old now. I'm not going to do it.
If I did it, I'd barf and it would fly in my face or something. I swear to God, or I'll hit a Canadian, Canada goose, not Canadian. They're a Canada goose or something like that. But like, the thought of that is just like, whoa. And I'm not good with heights, so I don't know. But I like planes. So that's weird. I want to go to Erin and see if Erin has ever jumped off a plane or glided. Have you done either of those
No.
things?
No, I'm with
Okay.
you, Lisa. I actually love planes and I don't mind flying, but I don't know, maybe because you're inside a giant tube and I can't tell I'm up so high. But the idea of
In
jumping out of a plane is terrifying.
it's Nancy has done bush planes in Africa, right? And you get some crazies. Back then it was in the 70s and early 80s, and they will do twirlies, and you do have barf bags and you do use them. She's done all that stuff. But then when we left South Africa, we went from England to Guernsey, and we got on this little plane, and this is before your big channel thing, your underground thingy, Glenn. Um, we went on
Glenn
this
owns
little
the channel.
dinky do the tunnel. And then that, but I'm glad it's on a train. Glenn told me about this. Now I've learned from Glenn, it's a train. You don't have to drive the tunnel. But we got on this little teeny plane, and I got searched really vigorously because I probably looked like a hippie at that point or something. And we were on the wing of the airport, which was Ireland. And there was this long-haired guy with a guitar next to me, and they just kind of put us both in this thing and searched, really patted us down. I'm not going to tell you how much I did or did not enjoy that. But they put us on this little dinky plane, and Nancy and I are sitting there. They bring tea, and it's a little plane. And Nancy and I look at each other going, this is a little teeny plane. And we look down, and we could see the ocean from cracks in the floorboards. And then
No.
when you try to drink your tea, your hand starts to shake, and it's not good. So Glenn, I don't know what those little planes are, but
Death
we made it.
traps.
We made it though. We made it. It was pretty, and but Glenn, those little planes, that was what, back in the early 90s? I don't know what those little planes were, but But
Neither
how did,
do I.
I think your channel might be better, your tunnel thing,
Yeah,
you know?
you can't get the tunnel to Guernsey though, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that goes to France. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we did make it there. And then we learned that, yeah, windy streets, man, glad I wasn't driving when we got there. But, an adventure. But Joe, let's go back to these museums. Tell us a little bit about, more about Glenn Curtis and your experience upstate.
Okay. Glenn Curtis, the museum was fascinating. It really did have everything. It had his early bicycles before and after he started adding motors. So he had the first motorcycle. And that was how he acquired the handle of being the fastest man alive. He recorded, I think in Ormond Beach, Florida, he was recorded doing, I don't know, like 136 miles an hour on a 40 horsepower motorcycle, a little V8 motorcycle.
Cool.
So things like that are there, exhibits that tell the whole story. There was what I think is probably one of the very first, like Winnebago. It was a camper, but it was all one piece. So it was like, it was so interesting. And I've got some pretty neat pictures of that. And that was, built on, it almost looked like an old truck almost that it was built onto. So it had all kinds of things and tons of airplanes hanging from the ceiling. So as you walk through, you've got planes overhead and planes on the floor. There were cars and motorcycles and bicycles and, old wooden carts that they used to put luggage on trains. Just a very interesting museum. And then at Harris Hill, they also have, as I was saying, they have only two museums in the country that are devoted to powerless flight. So the National Soaring Museum there had what the guys were talking about, the tissue paper gliders. they had planes that the gliders and soaring machines that looked like they were made of almost like models, like balsam wood and tissue paper almost. And I just can't imagine jumping out of one of those with a parachute. That was amazing to hear them talking about that a minute ago. But the Harris Hill opened, this museum opened back in 1978 with a 8,000 square foot hangar. And now it's just massive. I think it's 2 or 3 times that size. And there are archives there. There's a library where you could go and do research if this was your passion. And it's right across the driveway from the hangar for the gliders, where you can go and have a glider ride. They have volunteers that give rides every day.
Cool.
And they're all licensed pilots. They have a very active junior pilots group. They are learning how to fly. They can get their pilot's license, I think, at 14. They can't take paying passengers up that young, but they can fly themselves and solo at 14. And they earn their flight time. You were talking about how cheap it was at one time to learn to fly. Was that Glenn that was talking about that?
Oh, it was Mike. Mike.
But this is a great way for kids in that area that are passionate about flying. They can go and work, answer phones. When your glider is being towed, until it gets up to a certain speed, the wings are, tipping, and you catch a wing on the ground and flip it over. So somebody is holding the wings up and running alongside the plane as your tow plane is taking you down the runway. So the kids are doing that, and all those different things that they can do earns them time then in planes with a pilot. So they're getting their training, they're getting their free flight instructions. They get
cool.
Reduced rental fees because they're working off the rest of that fee working at the field. So it's just such a neat thing. And they've been there so long that they already have junior members who are now commercial pilots. They are competitors, these sailplane competitions nationwide or international, that they have. Their junior members are old enough to be competing, and they're professionals in all kinds of areas of aviation. So
there you go, Mike. Check that out. It's going.
Yeah.
Mike would be doing that now, right? Go for it.
At this very moment, in fact.
You start running.
we do sailplane activity here in southwestern New Mexico. In fact, I have been in a sailplane over our little city to 17,500 feet with no engine on oxygen in a sailplane.
Wow.
So
I
we
didn't
have
need oxygen.
Really good.
I'm like, that's crazy. That's crazy. Well, you know what? What about the people that went around the world on a solar plane? That made some history. That solar plane going around. That was like, I'm looking this going, this is epic, man. There's just so much to this. I mean, we wanted to be birds. I want to go back to Glenn, because Glenn did remember a woman pilot, Amy Johnson, right? And she's from England.
Yes, Amy Johnson. Yeah, I knew there was somebody who I had heard of, and actually there was a song about Amy Johnson, which you might want to look out. But yeah, I mean, she's the only woman pilot that I can think of who was famous for England. I think she flew to Australia from England. I think she
went down under.
Yeah, I think she was one of the first people to fly from England to Australia. But I wouldn't swear to that. That's just off the top of my head.
Wow. This is just, there's so many facets. I mean, you could talk about aviation for years and not cover Like it's just so big, and I just love the fact that we're talking about a lot of women pilots. It's Erin's fault here, which we love. I do want to ask you, Erin, in genealogy, if you're doing research on someone and they've fought in the military or been a pilot, do you get to look at pilot logs, or does any of that help in the quest to find your ancestral roots?
I think all of this helps. I think a lot of times when people start researching their family history, they automatically think birth, marriage, death, and maybe they'll branch out to newspapers. But our ancestors were very complex and they had lives. So yes, you should look at era museums. If your ancestors featured there, they may have information on them. Burke Lakefront, the airport I mentioned earlier, the International Women's Air and Space Museum, they have research, they have depositories. So you should look in that area. You should also always look at genealogical and historical societies because they collect information like that, and they could have information on your ancestors. And it could be in flight logs, in newspaper clippings, or if they had a school, which was Bessie Coleman's big dream, was that one day she would have her own school. But if she would have had to gotten permits and, maybe even building construction. So all of that information is very much worth looking at. Or going to this museum that Joe's speaking about, I guarantee there's information there that's not on the floor, and you could speak to somebody and they'll be like, oh yeah, I can look that up for you.
Yep. That's what Glenn does in England, right? Glenn, people email you and say, hey, I'm coming over. I need help. And you'll go look at the museum or dig up some papers or go to the church but with this, like with flight, I mean, you have to kind of look at who was stationed at these airfields, right? Look at those logs, and sometimes you'll find signatures and artifacts too that could have been your ancestors.
And sometimes you won't, though. It's important to understand. I know we were joking earlier about things being classified, but there are certain things that are still classified. Lots of Vietnam, 100% classified. Can't even look at it.
Mike is classified.
Yes.
I think that's certifiable.
Okay. Glenn, but in England, do you go and get those records of who was flying, if like World War I and II, but not Vietnam, like with Erin? I didn't know that, Erin, about that, because we also have to think about people that were in Vietnam. I mean, the helicopter pilots, there's some amazing history of the helicopter pilots, that flew and saved people, shot out of them. And I mean, that's a whole show just on helicopters and the power of helicopters and how different they are. And even now for filming, aviation is used to film like in national parks and things, and they use helicopters more than planes because of the circular, the wings being circular at the top and not being in the way. And they have more maneuver, capability when they go through canyons and things like that. So it's pretty interesting, the different, man, we could go on for years. This is crazy. But Glenn, yes, going back to England and World War I, World War II, do you look up those records of who was what and where? And maybe even they might have just been there for a few nights even, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many records. And like Aaron said, that there are records about who flew from which airfield and things like that. In fact, as I've said before, my son-in-law and my daughter, they actually live on a World War II airfield, and they have actually ploughed up the little tags that the people who worked in the hangars had to put in a rack when they went in the hangar, when they were on duty. So it's like a clocking in card system, and they were made of metal. And some of these had their names on, and they were Americans. And I've been able to trace some of the people who actually served on the airfield where my son-in-law now lives. But there's a fantastic website. I think it's a Facebook page about the 8th Air Force. And there is so much information held together by people who are interested in the 8th Air Force or in a particular group. and they collect all the logs and they index them, and the information is amazing. But yeah, what I do is I try and tie people together with the information that I have and take them to the right place. And it's just amazing what you can find.
That's amazing because you think about all those different components and how it's changed, like clocking in, and now look at us all so digitized and laser and everything. It's so different. And Mike, on the mechanical side, that's another thing to touch on as a mechanic, how much it's changed. I mean, and I've been to your home and where you work on cars and things like that too. I mean, I was just talking to a friend. This is not a plane, but this is what's interesting to me about how we worked on things then and now. So just a car thing. I went through a battery issue here, and the battery could have lasted maybe another 6 months. But a place I went to did diagnostics and said, well, it's not starting, so therefore you're going to cut out and you need a new thing. And I do that. And again, the car wouldn't start in the middle of the backwoods of Arkansas. Well, one of my friends, where we were saying, thank you, Bob, at Tiffany's Bed and Breakfast, he used to work on Ferraris and Lamborghinis and all this stuff. And he's like, nuh-uh, because all I did the handy thing of if you knock the battery 3 times with a hammer, it'll start. And it did. Well, that's because I took corrosion off every time I did it. And I did clean the corrosion off. I'm not that dumb. But he went in, opened up everything, found that little rats and squirrels and things had made nests in the car. In the air filter, I don't know how they got in there, but those little suckers got in there. And I said suckers with an S, got in there, and they had little acorn nests and things going on. But he cleaned the battery thing, and he said whoever put it in didn't do the parts properly, didn't clean it, and that's why it didn't start again. And so I don't care what they say about diagnostics all the time. Sometimes the human eye and that diligence needs to happen. So I wonder about the mechanical aspects of planes right now. I mean, look at what's happening with Boeing. Did I say that? I should probably have not said it, but there's mechanical issues that I wonder if we're running on diagnostics all the time and not having that human eye on some of the basic components. Can we lose sight of fixing things? I mean, it's changed over the years, right?
Absolutely. Sure. But the complexity is such that you, as a pilot, you should do a walk around. I mean, you do a pre-flight without a doubt, and you check this. You drain your fuel tanks a little bit to make sure there's no water in there. You look for hinges that are missing the pin in there, and you wiggle things around, and they're supposed to go from lock to lock without any trouble. Okay, now that's fine on a Cessna 150 built about 1965. I'm like that, easy to do. Carry a little step ladder, you can reach up on top of it and put your finger in the fuel tank. Okay, now you've got an airplane that has a computer control system, like an Airbus right now, fly-by-wire. As a pilot, you could spend days literally doing a pre-flight on an effective one that on a DC-3 you might have done in 10, 15 minutes. But now you got an airplane here, you're going to carry 300 passengers. You do a walk around to make sure nothing is not peeing out of the fuel tank, for instance, something obvious, but you really rely on your computer to make a check of this and that, make sure this 4 to 20 milliamp signal is 4 to 20 milliamps and that this surface goes up and down the way it's supposed to. We are in a position where it's very difficult to raise the hood on your car and see the battery. Oh, gee, it's corroded. I have a Cadillac ATS and the battery's in the trunk. In fact, you can't just raise the trunk lid and find the battery. You have to move another thing there. So we are putting ourselves in positions where we need power out of a battery, but we can't do much to find it in there. So things are getting worse, or they're changing.
You can't even change a tire anymore. I remember as a kid, one of the first things I learned about cars, you want to drive a car, learn how to change the oil, change the tire. I had to go through all of that.
Well, they don't even come with tires.
No,
that fifth tire is a little donut that gets you limping down the road.
No, that's if you went to a place and you can't sit down. But anyway, I didn't say that. And now if you don't fill the air in the fifth tire, your little dashboard thing will say there's something wrong. There's something wrong. It's because you don't have air in the fifth tire. And when you get your oil change and your tires done, how often do they just ignore your fifth tire? a lot,
100%.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing about all of this. Okay. In closing, because, oh my gosh, because I could go for like 2 hours easy with all of you on the show today. But in closing, I want to talk about naming the aviation vehicle. Okay. So I want to hear from each of you. Like, I know, Mike, you know about planes, have planes, all of that, but naming the vehicle is important. And do we say vehicle in aviation, Mike? Is that okay?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Let me see. I've never heard anybody other than you call an airplane a vehicle, but it is, I guess, possibly by definition.
An air vehicle. How about that?
Okay,
because
we've
got vehicles like gliders and, things like that. We've got Cessnas. We've got, F-14s. We've got fighter jets. We've got Zeppelins. Yeah. Right. So I want to hear from everyone and we don't have to be technical if we don't know it. But what you want to fly, if you could fly, right? Mike can fly, but if you could fly, what would you want to fly for the day? Just, you magically can do it, right? We can all magically be Mike, Magic Mike, and fly. But what would the vehicle, the apparatus vehicle, the air vehicle, whatever it is, be? And what would you name her? And I said her, but it could be a boy. Who knows? So I want to start with you, Erin. What do you want to fly?
I actually don't have an answer, but I can tell you what Bessie flew.
Okay. Well, what would you name one of her, if you took over one of her planes for a day, what would it be and what would you name it?
Oh,
see, that's so girly. It's a girly question. I know it is.
Well, I guess I would just name it Queen Bess after her. If it was the plane she flew, even though the plane she flew, everybody called it Jenny, the Curtiss JN4. I'm trying to dial back to like 8-year-old
Erin.
Erin.
Where her sign was? Because I have a picture of the Jenny.
Do you?
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Very cool. That's where I saw her name was with that plane.
There.
Oh, very cool. In the museum. That's cool.
Thank you. In the Curtiss Museum, the Curtiss Jenny.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So Erin, what are you you're going to call it Bess? Queen Bess?
Oh, I'm going to call it Queen Bess in honor of her.
I like that. So, Joe, what are you flying? Are you getting back on a glider or are you going to try a different vehicle?
Oh, if I get to fly all day, I want to go a lot further than just a few 100 miles. So I want a motor. And horse girl here, so I want to fly a Mustang. And I'm going to name it Sally, just cause.
All you want to do is ride around Sally, fly around Sally. You're going to put a Mustang car in the sky.
That's it.
Hey, you can do what you want. Why not? I mean,
that's what you told me. I could do anything I wanted.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. All right, Glenn, what about you?
Well, there was a man lived local to me who actually flew the autogyro in the James Bond films. And I would love to fly an autogyro. And I think I'd just have to call it a gyrocopter because that's what it is. I'd like that because you've got really good vision because it's you're open to the elements, and I'd love to be able to take lots of aerial photography because that's what I love to do.
Oh wow, cool. Now the name, we need the name. You got to be girly with this.
You got to be girly with it. Oh gosh, I can't think.
We don't have to be girly. You could be a male name. But it's even a good name, a gyro. I mean, come on, that's pretty good. But did I say gyro?
You could name
Geraldine.
it Miss M.
My wife has just called her Geraldine the gyrocopter. There you go.
Okay, now I like that. It's the purple people eater. Geraldine the gyrocopter. I like this. We could write a children's book out of this. Mike, What about you?
Well, I tell you what, I want a DC-3. I've ridden in them. I've never flown one, and I would call it Victoria for my wife. I have never owned an airplane or even a car that I've named, actually. And I'm looking back, I don't understand why. But in this case, if I had to have a name, my DC-3 would be Victoria. Hey,
the Flying V. I like this. I like this.
Hey,
what DC-3? What is that? Like,
a DC-3 is a Douglas airplane made in the early 30s. It started out in the early 30s. Was a C-46 or 7. They used them in World War II to haul troops. People jumped out of them. They were transports. They flew the hump. A good airplane with a gross weight, dry weight of about 16,000 pounds, a full load weight of about 25,000 pounds. An easy airplane to fly, I understand. A tail wheel, a transport, and they are still being used today. In fact, I flew one out of Columbia, Missouri. The Ozark Airlines was going to sell them all and switch over to Fairchild or something or other. I thought, I've got to ride in one of these. So at an early age, I bought a ticket and flew to Jefferson City and back on a DC-3. While we were flying, the stewardess did not close the outside door. There was a little chain across it. She just stood next to this and clipped this chain in place and stood in the doorway all the way from Columbia, Missouri to Jefferson City, Missouri.
No.
I'm not kidding. It's very strange. But a historic airplane movie, Shangri-La or Lost Horizon, I can't remember which, with Ronald Colman way back when. It has a DC-3 in it. They crash in the snow. Anyway, you want to see one? Watch that, whatever that movie was. So there.
Wow. And you could also watch Airplane too. You know. You
could, which is probably one of the best movies in the world of aircraft. At least funny movies, anyway.
Yes. It's like watching Best in Show, but airplanes, you know. It is.
That's true. Best in Show, a fellow with 2 left feet, as I remember.
Everyone's got to see Best in Show. Everyone has to. Everyone has to.
It's a great movie.
I want to fly in a Zeppelin because I don't get it. I don't know. Can you see all of the big bubble, you know? And then, of course, you have to play Led Zeppelin while you're doing it. And I want to drink champagne in a Zeppelin. And I want the Zeppelin to put Big Blend radio flying up, you know, its hind area. And I would call it, Zippy, the Zepp. Just off the fly. See what just comes out of my mouth out of no thinking. But, Zippy the Zepp, champagne and Big Blend radio coming out, you know, cause they do those little messages, right? Don't Zeppelins do that, or do you have to have one of those little zippy planes? Like it is, I want a zippy, but I want a Zeppelin.
Some of the Goodyear planes were doing that. Yeah. Goodyear dirigibles, or whatever they are. Yeah, they had it on site. Now with LEDs now, that'd be really easy to do.
Oh, now in a Zeppelin, is it a bunch of hot air? Or can you sit in the middle of the Zeppelin, or do you have to be in the front? What is it? What's going on?
The Zeppelins were filled with hydrogen.
Yeah.
Which is why the one that caught on fire in Lakehurst, New Jersey. What's that?
What wasn't that thing that they were in, hanging below, kind of called a basket, kind of like a hot air balloon, except enclosed.
In the Hindenburg, I mean, they were carrying passengers. They had airbags in there that were separate. They could actually walk up in the balloon area itself. It wasn't just a single area filled. There's a bunch of individual pieces, and they're filled with hydrogen in that case.
I just feel like we could be in space suits in the Zeppelin, inside the Zeppelin,
no
in
need.
the balloon area.
Listen, it was luxurious. They had an aluminum piano in the in the bar area. It was super transportation.
Okay, on that note, okay, we really do have to wrap this up, but in closing, I want to know if each of you would go to space as a space tourist if all expenses were paid. Would you do it, Mike? Would you go to space? I don't care what planet it is or anything. You would not?
I would not.
Okay.
Are you crazy?
No,
You'd jump out of an airplane, wouldn't you?
No. I mean, I don't want to wear those diapers or anything like that personally either. I'm not into that. What about you, Joe? Would you go to space? You're a travel writer. Come on.
Yeah, you know, Joe goes everywhere, so I probably would.
Oh my gosh. If there's wine, I mean, how would you drink your wine upside down? Oh, it might be a better effect, but
that's true. It's probably in one of those little squeeze bags like they used to put the Tang.
Oh my gosh, the Tang. Oh my gosh. Does that even exist now?
Yep, it does. Because I use it to make my Russian tea every year.
Oh, well, talk about the witch, the witches, the witches, the flying witches. Glenn, do you get Tang in England? I don't remember Tang. I remember Ribena in
No, we have
England.
Ribena, yeah, but I've never heard of Tang. And no, I would not go into space.
What about you, Aaron? Are you going to space?
A tough one. Part of me, once again, the small child in me is like, let's do it. But the adult in me is like, no, I'll let my son go. He can tell me all about it.
Yeah, and he can tell me too, because I don't want to go, I don't want to be upside down. And what if you get stuck there? Like there's people up there stuck floating around. What if that happens? And what happens, no, there's so many questions of what ifs, but one of the musicians on our show went up to space and he's a rocket scientist and he's a musician and he's a very super cool guy. And I asked him on the show, well, would you ever go to space? And he goes, yes. And matter of fact, you're going to hear some news soon. And no kidding, he went to space with William Shatner. No kidding. And I was like, wow. Dude, yeah, he did it. And he said the world was just gorgeous. Our planet is gorgeous. Yeah, amazing stuff. Well, thank you all for joining.
Photo op.
I know, right? The bird's eye view, literally.
That's it. Take my camera.
I just don't want to wear diapers. That's all. As long as I can delay it. I know I did it when I was a kid, but I will delay it as long as I can. Everyone, again, all the website links. We've got genealogybyaaron.com. We've got norfolk-tours.co.uk. And for Joe's articles, go to recipestravelculture.com. All of those links are in the episode notes. We want to thank the audience for joining us. And we have lots more attached to this aviation history show. And thank you all for joining us here on the show. Thank you.
Bye. See you later.
Bye. Let's all fly off. Thank you for joining us here on Big Blend Radio's Way Back When History Podcast. Keep up with us at bigblendradio.com.